Section 2.1 talks about rectangular coordinates and graphs. And the first thing we're going to talk about here is something called the distance formula. So it says, suppose point 1, which has coordinates x1 and y1, and point 2, r, has coordinates x2 and y2, are 2 points in the coordinate plane. The distance between P and R, and it's written like this, is given by the following formula. So we have the distance between P and R is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. All right, so the first problem here says, let's find the distance between the 2 points. All right, so I want you to notice something here. Look at the way the points are labeled. The first point has coordinates x1 and y1, and the second point has coordinates of x2 and y2. So when I look at my example here, I'm going to say, well, you know what? That's going to be my x1 and my y1, and this one here is going to be my x2 and my y2, okay? So now we're going to find the distance, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to write down the formula. Okay? I know it's right there in front of me, but I'm going to write it down because it's going to help me to figure out how to do the problem. Okay? So the first thing I need to do is, okay, what's my number x2? x2 is the number 2. What is x1? A negative 4 squared. What's my number y2? Negative 5. Minus, what's y1? 3 squared. Okay. So remember, minus and minus becomes plus, so 2 plus 4 is 6 squared. Minus 5 minus 3 is a negative 8 squared. Okay. So let's see. 6 squared is 36. Negative 8 squared is 64. If I add those up, that gives me 100. And the square root of 100 is 10. Okay, so we found the distance between those 2 points. All right, so I'm going to mosey on down to this one. Yes, I said mosey. And the first thing I'm going to do here, guys, I'm just going to write down my formula again, okay? So remember, it is x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay, so remember, this is my x1 and my y1. This is my x2 and my y2. So don't get nervous because we have these square roots all over the place. It's going to be fine, all right? So notice, x2, what is my number x2? 5 square root of 7. Minus, what is my number x1? A negative square root of 7 squared. Plus, y2 is a negative square root of 3. Minus y1 is an 8 square root of 3 squared. Okay. So remember, minus and minus become plus. So remember, if you don't remember, the number in front here, guys, is a 1, okay? These are like terms. It's like 5x plus 1x would give me 6x, right? So 5 square root of 7 plus another square root of 7 would give me 6 square root of 7. That's still being squared, okay? Remember, the number here is a negative 1. So minus 1 minus 8 is a minus 9. Square root of 3 squared. Okay. So now I'm going to come back over here, and we're going to do this part in pieces. Okay. So first part is, what is 6 squared? Well, 6 times 6 is 36. Now, if you remember, guys, the square and the square root cancel each other out, so that's just going to leave me with a 7. Okay. Now, the next part here is, what is negative 9 when I square it? Well, negative 9 times another negative 9 would be a positive 81. The square and the square root cancel each other out. That's going to give me a 3. Okay. So now, let me take my calculator. So I need to figure out what is 36 times 7. So turn it on, clear it out. What's 36 times 7? It is 252. So I'm going to put that right here, 252 plus, because there's a plus there. 81 times 3, I can do that in my head. That is 243. Okay. Now, I'm going to add those together. 5 and 4 is 9. 495, okay? So now I'm trying to figure out, how do I simplify the square root of 495? I have no idea. It's a big number, right? But I know that I can divide it at least by 5 because it ends in a 5, right? So let's say, what's 495 divided by 5? 99. I got 99 problems, and math ain't one. And yeah, I just did that too. And 99, I can break that up into 9 and 11, right? Now, remember, the square root means I'm looking for pairs. When I break up the number 9, I have a pair of the number 3. So when I'm doing my distance, because I'm looking at the square root of 495, I can take out a 3, right? Now remember, I'm not using the 9 anymore because I'm using the pair of 3's. These two numbers, since they were not paired up, need to go in back inside and they need to be multiplied. And so my distance here is 3 times the square root of 55. Okay, so another formula we have is something called the midpoint formula. And it says the coordinates of the midpoint of the line segment with endpoints P1, which has coordinates x1 and y1, and the second point Q, which has coordinates x2 and y2, are given by the following. Okay, so here is my midpoint formula. I want you to look at what we're doing. We're taking those two numbers, we're adding them together, and we're dividing by 2. And we're taking two numbers and we're adding them together and dividing by 2. Really what we're finding, guys, when we're doing that, if you take two numbers and add them together and divide by 2, you're finding the average of those two numbers, okay? So let's do it just like we did before. This is going to be my x1, that's going to be my y1. This will be my x2 and my y2. And now we're going to find the midpoint, okay? Now the midpoint is going to be a point. It's going to be coordinates, okay? So we'll have an x coordinate and a y coordinate. All right, so I'm just going to write down the formula: x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2. Okay, so now let's take our number x1, negative 4, plus x2, which is 2, divided by 2, and then y1, which is 3, plus negative 5, and divide it by 2. Okay, I'm going to scroll down un poquito. I'll tell you what, I'll write it over here because we're almost done. Okay, so negative 4 plus 2, negative 2 over 2. Let's see, 3 plus negative 5, also negative 2 over 2. And so now the coordinates of my midpoint, negative 2 divided by 2, is negative 1. And there's my midpoint. Okay. So let's do the same thing for the next problem here. Again, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to write down my formula. x1 plus x2 all over 2, y1 plus y2 all over 2. This is my x1, y1. That's my x2, y2. Okay. x1, negative square root of 7 plus 5 square root of 7 over 2. Y1, 8 square root of 3 plus a negative square root of 3 all over 2. Okay. So remember, the number there is a negative 1, right? So negative 1 plus 5, 4 square root of 7 over 2. The number here is a 1. 8 minus 1, 7 square root of 3 over 2. Okay. And finally, I'm going to simplify what I can. So 2 goes into 4 2 times, so this is 2 square root of 7. Here, I can't simplify anything because 2 doesn't go into 7 nice and neat. So it's just 7 square root of 3 all over 2. Okay, so the directions on this point say find the coordinates of the other endpoint given one endpoint in the midpoint of the line segment. Okay, so we're going to say the coordinates of our midpoint is x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2, okay? And we know the midpoint here, and we know an endpoint. So let's go ahead and do this part. Okay, so I want you to think about this is my x coordinate of my midpoint. And this is, say, one of the endpoints. How about if we just call this, I'm just going to label it x2 and y2. Okay. So I know that the x coordinate of my midpoint in this case is the number -7, right? And I also know, I also know that x2 is the number -9 over 2, okay? So all I want to do now is solve for x1. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, look, let me multiply. I can think about cross multiplying. So 2 times -7 is a -14. When I multiply this by 1, I get the same thing, right? And instead of me writing a plus -9, guys, I'm just going to write a -9, okay? And then we can go and add 9 to both sides. And so I came up with x1 to be -5, okay? So we have the x coordinate of our other endpoint. Now we need to do the same thing for the y part, okay? So we're going to go like this. y1 plus y2, which is the number 9, all over 2, is equal to the y coordinate of my midpoint, okay? And so now I'm going to think about this over 1, and I'm going to cross multiply. So 1 times all that is still y1 plus 9 equals 2 times 6 is 12. So when we subtract 9, I get y1 is equal to 3. So the coordinates of my other point would be -5 and 3. Okay. All right. Let's do another problem like that. Make sure that we got the hang of it. Okay. So look, how about if I call this my x2 and my y2? And so I know that the midpoint is going to be x1 plus x2, which is a -16, all over 2. And that's equal to the x coordinate of my midpoint. So just like we did earlier, guys, I'm going to think about this over 1. So when I multiply 1 times that, I'm going to get x1. Again, instead of me writing plus minus, I'll just write -16 equals 2 times -9 is a -18. I'm going to add 16 to both sides. And we come up with x1 is -18 plus 16, -2. Okay. Now, let's do the same thing for the y coordinate, okay? So it's going to say y1 plus y2, which in this case is 9, all over 2, is equal to the y coordinate of my midpoint. I'll think about that over 1 again, cross multiply. So y1 plus 9 equals 16. Let me subtract 9 on both sides. And I end up with y1 is equal to 7. So if here's my x coordinate, my y coordinate, then the coordinates of our endpoint is going to be -2, 7. Right? Alrighty. So in going to the next problem here, it says bachelor's degree attainment. The graph shows a straight line that approximates the percentage of Americans 25 years and older who would earn a bachelor's degree or earn bachelor's degrees or higher for the years 1990 to 2012. Use the midpoint formula and the two given points to estimate the percent in 2001. Okay, and then compare the answer with the actual percent of 26.2. So what I want you to notice here, 2001 is right in the middle. What we're trying to figure out is what is that y coordinate right there, okay? So I want to show you something. If I were to take 1990 and add 2012 and divide it by 2, let me grab my calculator. It's right here. Turn it back on. 1990 plus 2012 and 4002 and divide it by 2, we would come up with 2001, right? Okay, so we know that that is the x coordinate of the midpoint of this segment, right? We're just trying to find the y coordinate. So guys, The easiest way for us to find the y coordinate, we're going to take those two y values, add them up, and divide by 2. Okay. So let me move this over here, 21.3 plus 30.9 equals divided by 2. And I'm coming up with 26.1, right? And it says, if you notice right here, it says compare with the actual answer of 26.2. Yeah, we're pretty close, right? Remember, these are percents. So 26.2% was the actual. And based on this graph here, we came up with 26.1%. So we were very, very close, okay? That's all it wanted us to do. All right. So let's take a look at the next problem here. And it says, the table lists how poverty level, income, cutoffs in dollars for a family of 4 have changed over time. Use the midpoint formula to approximate the poverty level cutoff in 2012 to the nearest dollar. So we're looking for 2012. So if you notice, here's 2011, here's 2013. 2012 is going to be right between those two. So all we need to do is find the average of those two numbers. So I'm going to take 23,021. I'm going to add 23,834. We're going to divide them both by 2. So let me grab my calculator again. 23,021 plus 23,834. And let's divide it by 2. And I'm coming up with 23,427.5. 23,427.5. That would be like 50 cents. Look what it asked me to do, though. It's asking me to the nearest dollar. So to the nearest dollar, that would actually be $23,428, right? Good, good, good. And that right there, guys, is 2.1.